Hey guys, it's Kip with DT4EMS, and I'm here with my good friend Matthew Lopez, a guy who's been instrumental in helping me learn to speak the administrative language and become a great family friend, and not just for the personal family, but for the DT4EMS family too across the country. Everybody that has met him loves him, and I'm sure some of this here will prove exactly why people love him so much. So without any further ado, here's Matt Lopez, a little bit about his background.
Hey Kip, how are you? Thanks for inviting me in. So you asked about background, and my background's a little bit diverse, but like most people in EMS and fire, we all have diverse backgrounds. I started really in the emergency management world, working for the state of Florida, segued from there into the public safety world as a firefighter, worked my way up into a company officer position here in Florida, and left as a lieutenant into the corporate world. I took the jump or the plunge or against better judgment. And when I found myself in the corporate world, I started working in the for-profit hospital world as a director of business development under the service lines of the ED and EMS outreach. And so my background, again, like everyone, has a little bit of military, a little bit of public safety, a little bit of hospital administration, all sprinkled in. So, jack of all trades, master of none.
That's definitely most of us. So, we've talked before, but what about, where did you start to get a buy-in when it came to EVE? I mean, what made you finally go, oh, okay, yeah, this makes sense?
So my skepticism was about as high as probably anyone else investigating a program on the internet. We knew in my position in the hospital that we had a problem. Our ER director identified a problem of ED violence. Our hospital CEO, who was a super forward-thinking, progressive guy, understood that we needed to do something about it. And we had been employing a course called CPI for years and years and years to curtail the violence. However, it didn't really seem to curtail anything other than a couple extra CEUs for our nurses. And so I started doing some research on the internet and took on the task of finding a program that was viable for our ED staff, and really to understand what to do in case of a violent encounter. I found your program after finding several others, and when I started talking to you, you did something that kind of took me back to childhood. When I was a kid growing up in New York, I remember there was a company called PC Richard and Sons. I'll never forget this. They had this thing where if you bought electronics from them and you weren't satisfied, you could take it back, money back guarantee. And I remember telling my dad that's why he needed to buy a Nintendo. If he didn't like it, we could get our money back. And so, salesman right from the beginning, as a kid, I tried and it didn't work, but I still remember that because that was my first real pitch at, getting my dad to buy me something big. And anyway, when I was chatting with you, you said something that just struck me. If you don't like the program, you don't pay a thing. Just leave. Just no problem. And I said to myself, if a guy's willing to put his money where his mouth is and take a person who has never seen the program before and say, you know what, come on down, I think you'll like it. You'll like it so much that, in fact, if you don't like it, it's free. I thought either this guy's super confident or he's got a good course. And about an hour and a half into the course on the first day, I was only supposed to be down in Daytona for 3 days. And I sent a text message to both the ER director and the CEO of the hospital and said, I'm going to be in Daytona Beach for 5. It's not a vacation. I'm going through the instructor course with DT4EMS. And that started this relationship that has grown to a friendship and has grown to a peer relationship. And now, years later, I consider you family. So.
Yeah, and we do too. I mean, I mean, shucks, you were even at my, wedding, and Linz and I, we hadn't, if I think right, we'd only dated for not that long when we first met, right?
A few months, yep.
We'd only been dating for a couple of months, but You've been able to travel around a lot with me and meet up at different locations. You met up with me in, Connecticut, and you've met up with me in North Carolina and Missouri, and of course, stuff that we've done in Florida, not only together, but then, you've also gone off and have taught a bunch of classes yourself. You've even become an instructor trainer with us, which has been awesome, by the way. But the thing is that since we talk a lot about culture change and people seeing the truth and revealing their truth to them, and that when people come in with an open mind, they get more than what they were expecting. And sometimes it's tough if I say it and I go, look, I've had was in Indy and had a 30-year veteran go, yeah, this is great. I was in North Carolina and had someone go 34 years in EMS go, man, where's this been? That they really love the program. And then you recently had something not too long ago where you've had that person that comes into class with, over a couple of decades of experience, going, this is going to be garbage. And then all of a sudden leave going, holy cow, this was something. Have you had stuff like that?
Yeah. So I'll give you a really recent, for instance. Leon County EMS, which is in the state capital, it's in Tallahassee, Florida, worked together with their human resources department, and their new chief was forward thinking enough to say, we are going to mandate our entire service going through EVE, from the top line administrative staff all the way down to the brand new on probation EMT and paramedic. And when you mandate something, a unique thing happens. You get the people that really, really want to be there, and you get the people that are volunteered, if you will, to be there. And so I'm now in the 4th class. I try and limit my classes to a certain class cap size so that I could make sure that we're teaching the message and we're doing it safely. And now that we're in that 4th class, the people that were eager signed up first. The people who are late arrivals, if you will, or late adopters to anything, sign up last. And so being that we're in the final stage, we have 2 more classes and we're all done with the service. I had a gentleman that walked in, and he walked in right on time, not early, but about 30 seconds before we started. And he sat in the back chair and he had his arms crossed. And he was an older gentleman. So I thought either you just came into EMS as a 2nd or 3rd career, or you've been doing this for a long time. And being that I'm not young anymore, but I'm not mature anymore, I'm kind of at that stage where you'll talk to me for 30 seconds and go either relevant, or you'll talk to me for 30 seconds and go, listen, son, let me tell you how it is. And so understanding that, there was about a 20-year age gap between myself and this gentleman sitting in the room. And, he kind of looked at me like, oh, my son's up there teaching me a class. What is this young buck going to teach me that I don't already know? And at the first real time to sit down and discuss, which was about lunchtime, he walked up to me and he said, I've been in EMS for 34 years. And now I've got to Quentin Tarantino back in time and realize that I'm just out of diapers 34 years ago. And he said, in 34 years, I didn't know half of the stuff that you were talking about today. I mean, I knew what I would do if there was a situation, but I didn't know what was reasonable. I didn't know what was legal. I didn't know that I had a right to interact the certain way that I did. He goes, I've been taking ACLS classes and PALS classes and taking those for years. And every year I have to do some recert or I have to do X amount of CEUs. And he goes, you just know this stuff. So you go into that just memory of I've done it this way forever and I'm still going to do it this way. And maybe you changed an instrument. Instead of a thumper, now you have the Lucas device or the Zoll device. Instead of, amiodarone, back in the day, it might've been lidocaine. But he said, basically things are about the same. And he goes, when you're sitting there, I'm wondering to myself, why haven't I had this class before? And how many people left the service that wouldn't have left the service if we had this class before? And so he said, you got me, and you got everyone else in the room by making the class relatable. And I had to share, you know, it's not me that's making the class relatable. It's the course itself that the course teaches you in a much different way than I think we're used to learning. We're used to learning in, you give me information, I regurgitate the information back, and you say, good job. I give you information on how many times to compress on a chest. You compress on a chest 30 times, you give 2 breaths, good job. I give you information of, you know, what this patient should react, and you tell me back a couple extra things, and good job. This, not only am I giving you information, but you have a chance to digest it and you have a chance to challenge. And I hope you challenge. That's the best part of the class. That's where some of the real culture starts changing of, hey, but what if? Or, hey, I'm not sure of. Then not only do you get to challenge, but you get to put it into practice. And by putting it into practice, your brain gets to see, I'm not getting it, I'm not getting it, I'm not getting it. Hold on, brain, you should be getting it. I'm still not getting it. Wait, I just got it. Mm-hmm. Wait, how'd I get it? What do you mean I haven't had any training in this before, and oh, my brain responded again. And you get a chance to really rip things apart in a level that you've never had a chance to understand the who, what, when, where, and why of anything. So it's not just regurgitating something back, it's seeing it in application, it's doing it yourself, it's believing in yourself, and, you know, at the same time challenging the instructor and you know, the why. And when a person that's been in the service for 34 years gets to the why of something instead of the how, that's a game changer. And so I was floored when this guy started explaining what he did and really how personal this class was. But it's not just Tallahassee that it happens. It happens with nurses in Arizona. It happens with medics in Missouri. It happens with my own friends here in Panama. And, you know, the old adage, you're a genius if you come from 50 miles away and carry a briefcase, but you're an idiot if you live inside the 50-mile bubble and you talk to people. I've tried that adage out, and I've tried to teach my friends in my bubble and have had people in my bubble that knew me as the guy who crashed the ladder truck, or knew me as, you know, the guy who, you know, knocked on the wrong person's door in the morning and woke him up. You know, we have our little mistakes that we'll make and going to the wrong address or making a mistake in the service. That's just the service that we live in. And if they could get past that and see the message for what it is, that's the culture change of DT4EMS.
Well, it's funny that you bring up something too, where we see it in all these different places. And, you know, of course, my shelves are full of, you know, little things that people have given me, either a family version of a challenge coin, or even one guy wrote some stuff, a business card attached to it. I mean, it's those things that make all the difference in the world, and that we see it across the country. But there was also another interesting thing, because they came out of this class, and you know, again, we don't need to name a person's name or whatever, but there was like 4 or 5 months ago when, you know, we heard or he heard that the training was going to be coming, and apparently he had only heard bits or pieces of what we do, and he was pretty adamant about how, you know, our class was an admin protection class only, and it was not going to be any good. It was going to be all this normal, you know, garbage that has been shoved down frontline staff's throat for so long. But then all of a sudden, when the guy took the whole class, which is, again, is why we say they either get our whole thing or they get nothing. Because when people are trying to change on the cheap, I get training on a budget. I understand all that. That's what we're all about. We show you how to do it, give them all the resources. But there's a difference when you try to change on the cheap. And you're only going to give this piece over here or this piece over here that you think is going to fix it, when the problem is sometimes folks aren't even aware what the real issue is. So they try to fix over here or they fix over here, and it's that square tool with a round problem kind of a thing. So when they get our whole message and they see the product as a whole, because we take our people through essentially an emotional roller coaster of learning, they do like this guy did. I mean, this guy, which first of all, I have to commend him because, you know, he was, you know, pretty honest with his opinion in the beginning before he took the whole program. And then when he took the program, the dude took to social media and immediately types up this big thing going, guys, I gave a scathing review that was not correct. I mean, I only went on this piece of information, but now that I took it, you know, I think it's different. Everybody should take it. Did that not happen in this class also?
Yeah. So you talked about doing it on the cheap. So I was allowed to come in during training days for certain programs yearly in service, and they pull everyone in online, and they do about an 8-hour lecture in which there's different speakers throughout the day. I think 8 or 9 different speakers, and provide you lunch, and you get CEUs. And in one of the 45-minute blocks, I was invited in to speak. And in that 45-minute block, this gentleman was sitting in there, and this gentleman comes from New York. Great background of riding the rigs, both lots of friends in the FDNY world. I believe he worked for FDNY EMS for a little bit, and then worked for one of the Catholic systems in New York. So very salty. And I opened it with, there's no such thing as an unsafe scene. And if your policy is for staging for unsafe scenes, fantastic, but where are paramedics being assaulted? And he had a hard time palating that there's no such thing as unsafe scene. There's safe scenes all over the place. The old lady is a safe scene. The old man is a safe scene. The you know, high school that you go to is a safe scene. And who is this guy who, by the way, is dressed in a completely different way than I am? This guy was wearing a suit. He works in a hospital. He's an administrator. He has no idea what it's like to don a polo shirt and a pair of BDUs with some trauma shears on the side and buck up and ride in a truck. And because I hadn't shared background that I worked on both sides of the house, I was culturally irrelevant before I even had a chance to start. And right there, he shut down. And he remained not only so shut down, but shut down enough to share it with social media and Facebook. And I'm sure if he had a Twitter, it would have been there too. After class, actually at the very first break in the day, he walked up to me and shook my hand and said, "Wow, why didn't you teach this during training days?" And I said, "Well, I can't teach a 16-hour EMS course in 45 minutes. I can hit some high points and move on. And I want you to just consider this." And if you're a nurse watching this, if you're a medic watching this, if you're an EMT watching this, I want you to think about it this way. If the entire course that you took, that you passed, that you have a diploma on your wall or a certificate, was condensed down into 30 minutes, would you have learned what you learned? The good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent. And I think every single person can say, no, I needed to be in the quote unquote boring part, or I needed to be in the part that made a lot of sense, or I needed to be in the part where I failed and I made flashcards and I racked my brain all night long to try and comprehend to make it all work. And, you know, that's what the 8-hour course does for nurses and for techs and for physicians in the ED. That's what the 16-hour course that goes much more into the what to do when you're arriving in a uncontrolled scene, in someone's house, in someone's arena, in someone's church, in someone's bar, and how those things changes. And the common thing I hear at the end of every course is, I wish I had more time, or can you do another course, like an intermediate or an advanced course? And so this guy, who most people would take as a curmudgeon for, you know, giving a bad review and saying that it's just for administration, wound up walking away going, I was wrong. And like you say, I applaud him for sharing it with people, but he didn't just share it with people. He's been correcting people, you know, ever since, that have said, you need to do this controversial thing like, choke someone out, or you need to punch someone in the face. And he's saying, is that reasonable? Which that's a culture shift that is amazing that you can see happen. So
we most certainly heard that all over the country. You were classes where people could obviously see the mud hole in my hole, and we go to places where those people also change, and they go, man, everything is different now, where they're much more into, we're getting them back to where they were when they started, into healthcare. Now,
well, I'm not sure if you experience this, but it's wild to me. So every class, I have the same thing happen, and I can tell right off the bat with the class whether they're going to be fighters or they're going to be flighters or freezers. And we'll put those in the same category, because I'll start teaching the very first thing, which is the parry. And if people just get it in 30 seconds and there's no hesitation, there's no resistance, my brain goes, whoop. This might be a class that we focus a lot more on verbal de-escalation, on diffusion, on bringing it down to not being in the mix in the first place to use your physical skills. And then I have other classes where the parry is the most foreign thing in the world, and they're sitting going, I can't do this, and it doesn't make sense. Verbally, their verbal skills are off the charts, and physically you have to get them past the, wait, I can respond this way, or I can do this, and it's just exciting. But every class, and I'm not sure if you've experienced this too, but every class you see it, and that's the great thing about a program like this, is you can take the entire message but cater it to the needs of the class. You're not just teaching some canned class that has no applicability to the room. And
and if our message is being trained correctly, and when we do it right, those people that are really physically skilled feel compelled to bring up their peers. They're not shutting them down. They're bringing up those who aren't as physical. And then the intellectual are then bringing up those who are more physical. So what we end up with is a group that turns around and goes, oh, on this side, and then they're going, oh, on this side, and then collectively they become stronger as a whole, because then, the truth starts to come out. Because again, nothing is perfect, but man, we are always working and trying to get better and better and better. They present the message in the way we share it. But I'll tell you something that was, so there's a couple incidents that you and I have talked about over the years that have to do with certain sections in the class. And now if people want to go and research what some of those are that we're about to bring up, we're just going to use the quick examples. And number one is when we talk about having a safe word, or a word that is used when something is going to go south, or we witness something that maybe our partner didn't see, we use, hey, what color's purple? Something that's a very off the wall, not a, hey, look, he's got a gun, or look, he's got the knife, or hey, he's trying to choke you. But instead do something that's low key, because then we can still formulate a plan, at least for a moment in time. Did you have something where purple came into play one day that's actually kind of humorous?
So this is one of my favorite stories to tell the class, because and to set the stage again, your whole goal is to not let the person who could be a potential attacker or who is an attacker and ready to aggress on you, the whole goal is not to let them know what your plan is, but for you to have a pre-rehearsed idea to take action. And so I just walked out of the administrative office at the hospital. I had a meeting with not only the entire O suite, CNO, COO, CFO, CEO, but it was also with several department directors, because we were talking about the development of a service line. Okay, so instead of Matt Lopez, the fireman, you now have Matt Lopez, the hospital guy, that's looking at analytics, that's looking at comprehensive data, that's looking at service line recruitment and retention of physicians. And the last thing that I'm thinking of is, what color is purple? It's the last thing there, because I'm now in my safe world and my nerd world, which is where I love to be. So I walk out of administration, and there's a gentleman who is holding a really nasty, dark, damp, dank-looking bloody rag in his hand, and he's compressing his hand kind of like this. And he goes, help. And he pushes his hands forward towards me, and I'm thinking to myself, which is probably the worst thing you could think, but I'm thinking, this is my brand new suit. Like, I've gotten one use out of it from Joseph A. Bank, and I don't want to get blood all over me. So instead, I pull away and say, hey, man, what's the problem? Now, I can clearly see what the problem is. And he goes, I cut myself. I need help. And I said, okay, well, why don't I just get a towel for you? And he goes to lunge forward, and he goes, why don't I use the pocket off your shirt or off your jacket? And he goes forward, reaching his hand to rip off the pocket of my suit. And I looked at him, and I don't know what came over me, but I just gave him that 1,000-yard stare and said, using an expletive that I will not use, don't you dare blank think about touching my shirt. And the gentleman stopped, and he looked at me, and he looked from the top of my forehead down to the bottom of my shoes, and then slowly came back up again and took a quarter of a step back and goes, all right, go get a rag. And in my head now, everything that I learned in EVE, I'm now out of analytic brain, I'm now into EVE brain. And walking out the door at the same time was the administrator of our hospital. And I said to her, hey, this guy just cut himself. Can you go get a paper towel? Because the last thing I'm going to do is leave her with this gentleman who now looked at me and a second ago was going to rip the pocket off of my shirt. Oh, by the way, he was homeless. So, you know, this isn't just a guy that looks perfectly normal and logical. This is a guy that looks like he's had some tough times and that he wouldn't hesitate to do something. So she comes out of administration with about 30 paper towels and goes and gives them to the gentleman, and he takes the paper towels, throws it right on top of his dirty rag. And I said, why don't you walk with me to the emergency room? And as we're walking down the hallway, leaving a nice little trail of pellets of blood on the floor because he's bleeding pretty good from his hand, I was about to go in the back door of our ER, the door that takes you back in the patient area. You're going to go past a couple of directors' offices, but you're right in the mix right away. And again, this thing you learn in EVE, this gut feeling comes across of don't go through the back door, go through the front door, which bypasses triage and security, and alert them that this guy is coming in. And I don't know, again, why, but I know enough to listen to that something's wrong here in the back of my mind from taking this course. And so now I'm walking by security, and we have a guy who is a security guard. And if he's listening to this, I won't call you by name, but he'll know exactly who he is. He's 6'8", and he is this big looming presence. When you put a 6'8" big dude who is a part-time sheriff's deputy sheriff, you know, and he also is the full-time guy over the security team at the hospital. When he steps up, he commands attention. And so he had just been through this course, and I said, hey, buddy, I have a gentleman who cut himself outside, and he's bleeding pretty good. What color's purple? And he stands up out of his chair, and he goes, what you got, man? What you got? And I was like, oh, nothing at all. The guy said he cut himself, and you know that he still got the knife in his pocket that he cut himself with, and I just, you know, just wanted to let you know what was going on. And he's like, okay, man, okay. And now, instead of us walking gingerly into the ER, now I've got Mike, who's a quarter of a pace behind me. Gosh, I just said his name. Sorry about that. Quarter of a pace behind me, and he knows it's go time because he knows we know something that this person who has a knife in his hand doesn't know. And so we talk very quickly to the charge nurse, and charge nurse gives us a room. We sit down on one of the stretchers in the ED room, and as the nurse goes to walk in the door to say, "Hey, what's going on?" I shared with the nurse, "Hey, this gentleman cut himself. He still has the knife in his pocket, and I just wanted to let you know what was going on. He definitely needs some assistance." And Mike looks and says, "Hey, man, you got a knife?" The guy goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Where is it?" And the guy gave the same flippin' look that he did to me not even 3 minutes beforehand, stared at the top of Mike's head all the way down to the bottom of Mike's boots, and he's a lot taller than I am. And of course, now my hands are up and open, waiting, and you'll learn what that means later on. And Mike looks at him and he says, "You know you can't have a knife in the ER. There's nothing wrong with having a knife, though. Why don't you just give me the knife? I'll keep it in safekeeping. When we bandage you all up, I'll give it back to you. No problem, no questions asked." And this guy looked at him again, put his hand in his pocket, pulled out the knife, and just calmly rested it in Mike's hands, and Mike took it away. And right there just went to show amazing customer service. Did the gentleman have the ability to harm us? Absolutely. Did the guy already want to reach out and cut the pocket square and pocket right off of my suit? Absolutely. Did he already show that he'd be aggressive? Absolutely. Did he attack us yet? No. And the customer service to keep him in that patient attacker mode worked all the way for us to get the moment in time to get the upper hand. And getting the upper hand doesn't mean physically getting the upper hand. Getting the upper hand can simply be that mentally, I had the upper hand, I knew what was going on, I diffused the situation, I interrupted his thought process, and now made him feel okay. And we removed the potentially violent device from his hand, and he was a pleasure to the nurses. Left, and we realized after time, while there was a lot of ETOH on board, he was simply whittling. He was drunk, whittling, and stabbed himself in the hand pretty hard and lacerated it pretty clearly. And he just was drunk, so he wasn't in the frame of mind of being probably the nicest person in the world. So ripping a pocket square in a suit pocket off of someone's shirt probably seemed like a logical thought to him until, yeah. But great story.
Yeah,
real
exactly.
application.
I think it's awesome.
Last thing I was expecting.
Because he caught you guys by surprise, being in a place in the hospital where you technically shouldn't have been, and then all of the other behavior things that go there, but understanding how to, handle each piece of that, because you weren't attempting to physically control him at any given time, nor did, security didn't try to control him. And the idea was to go, look, wait a minute, there's ways that maybe if we eat a little humble pie once in a while, we won't find ourselves in the middle of a use of force, type of a situation. But let's say, but I love that story, so I had to catch it on camera to get you to share it too, because I've told people about it around the country whenever we get to Purple. I'm like, oh, I love this story. But excuse me, I think people can hear my voices. I'm still trying to get over this thing that I've had here. Let's say you've got some administrators who happen to watch this piece, and you're trying to say, hey, look, if you guys are looking at a program or any program, you're even investigating, why you should be, training your staff in EVE, is there anything that you might help an administrator to maybe calm their fears or give them some information regarding why they should look at us and what makes us stand out?
So I'll talk to hospital administrators directly, and EMS administrators that are listening, and fire chiefs that are listening. Please understand this has the same applicability, but talking directly to the O that's sitting in a room, one of your main goals at your hospital is the financial viability of your facility. You want the highest return on investment, or you want the best patient experience, or you want the best satisfaction all the way across. There's not a fire chief or an EMS chief or a chief operating officer or chief executive officer in the country that doesn't look at a financial bottom line. Doesn't happen. And for those folks that are looking at a financial bottom line, I want you to think about this. If you do not train your staff into what is reasonable and what is not, then what you're doing is you're now playing Russian roulette with a lawsuit. And what I mean by that is this. If someone grabs your nurse's hair, what happens next? If you can't say they'll react this way because they've been trained, you might see that they react in a completely different way. If someone says a person just grabbed your paramedic by the throat, what happens next? If you don't know the reasonable way that you have treated them or trained them to react, you might be that next potential lawsuit that we see. And no one wants their hospital or the EMS agency or their fire department to be on the front line local news station or national news station. No one wants that. But we've seen it time and time again where because of a failure to train, you're putting yourself in a liability situation that often doesn't bode well for your facility. Now we'll take it down to a staff member who's looking at this. Failure to train is training to fail. There's no simple other way that you can explain it. And your failure to train is taking that course where instead of having a verbal skills formula or or having a recipe to de-escalate verbally a situation, we teach you hands only. And if I'm only teaching you how to use your hands to get out of a situation and not teaching you what to say or how to do it or role playing that situation, you failed. If on the contra side, all you're doing is teaching someone to talk their way out of it that's getting hit or getting kicked or getting grabbed or getting choked, if the only thing they can do is say, please don't or stop, you're actually hurting them, which is one of your human resources, one of those things that you've swore to protect inside your environment. You're hurting them physically. And by hurting them physically, that might be a laceration, that might be a broken bone, that might be in the worst case, a fatality that's happening literally on your watch. And so where the rubber truly meets the road is this. If you had a program that would teach your frontline staff, your nurses, your techs, your doctors, your fellows, your EMTs, your paramedics, your firefighters, your first responders, how to act reasonably, so if they did it reasonably, your entire department, your entire staff, your entire agency, your entire hospital system would be protected legally. And if they did it unreasonably, after teaching them what was reasonable, they'd be on their own. You have now checked the box from a liability standpoint. If on the opposite side, you have trained your staff to know what is reasonable, to act reasonable, you have also checked the box in making sure that your staff is trained so that if this situation happens, this is how they respond next, and you've empowered your staff in a way that they've never been empowered before. Because after taking this course, one thing is true. If a nurse doesn't know if she can react a certain way, she won't. If a tech doesn't know they can react a certain way, he won't. And if a firefighter doesn't know they can react a certain way, he won't. That can go good, that can go bad, that can go ugly, or it can just be. But at the end of the day, it comes down to failure to train is training to fail. That's what I would say to any administrator.
Which brings me to another point, something we've been doing for years, showing that all of the studies, whether it be by the ENA, the NAEMT, Drexel University, anybody that's done a study, formally, we've shown that while, great intentions, that those studies have been flawed. And not flawed because they didn't try to do the study correct, but that there was a culture that existed of underreporting, failure to define, really what was going on. And one of the things that I've said, and I know you've experienced, well, I shouldn't have said I know you do. I was going to sit there and lead you into that and to let you tell about it as well. But have you not witnessed yourself, us being in classrooms where we can have a room full of people and we ask if they've ever been criminally assaulted once we've defined what a criminal assault is, that drunk or drugged individual who purposefully intended to attack you versus the grandma who didn't mean to. And we have those people raise their hand, and then we get 80 to 100% of the room with their hands raised, stating the fact they've been criminally assaulted. But yet, when we ask how many of those formally reported it to their supervisors and or the police, only 2 to 3% keep their hands up. Would you say that you have witnessed that type of a scenario play out in your classes?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, I'll take you back to exactly how I usually ask the question. And if you're watching this, feel free to participate. If you've been criminally assaulted on the job, just simply nod. And if you're nodding yourself, fantastic. If you're wondering, have I been criminally assaulted on the job, I'm going to ask you a question that I ask every class that I teach. And it doesn't matter if it's in the hospital or in the EMS or the fire setting. But I'm going to preface it first. If you didn't nod to the fact that you've been criminally assaulted, take note as to why you didn't nod after I go through this little quiz. If you've ever been intentionally spat at or spat upon by someone, raise your left hand. Kip, feel free to participate. If you've ever been punched by someone intentionally, not someone that's trying to extubate their tube and is doing something kind of involuntary or in hypoxic rage, but actually physically been punched at or been struck, raise your right hand. And if you've ever been kicked intentionally, not someone that's trying to get away, but someone that intentionally mule kicks you or kicks you to get away from you because they are trying to be aggressive, go ahead and stand up. And then I keep going with this to punched, spat on, kicked, grabbed inappropriately. The female who grabs at a male inappropriately, or the male who grabs a female inappropriately, or at least inappropriately tries to touch you. If that has happened, every single one of those situations are a criminal assault. And if you're looking at yourself going, I'm not really sure, I implore you right now to look at your state statutes, which are a statute. This is law. This is the supreme law of your entire state. And if you're looking at this from a EMT or a paramedic or a nurse standpoint, even look further to see if that's a felony assault in your state versus a misdemeanor, because it's happening while you're on the job in your uniform. And then look at what it's classified as. And if you're still going, yeah, but, take this class, because we want you to challenge with the yeah, buts, but we also want you to understand what is legal. And every one of those situations, we can show chapter and verse in the state, chapter and verse in probably your own employee handbook, what is legal and what is criminal. And every one of those that I mentioned are a criminal assault.
And so we get this overwhelming, and it just kind of ties back to, what you were talking about earlier about empowering staff and things like that, because now what we've witnessed is this culture, which, criminal assaults have gone on as part of the job, which we're now finding, and we're starting to finally get some of the big boys to, talk about this, whether it be the trade magazines or some of the, publications or websites, or people actually starting to take notice. And again, huge props to the ENA, huge props to the NAEMT, huge props to Drexel and Jen Taylor out there for, doing their best to help raise awareness for this. And actually, I'm gonna throw a big shout out to EMS1, because they were like really the first to hit it head on. And I mean, really start going, wait a minute, something's not right here, and go after it time and time and time again to try to bring awareness. And so now that we've got awareness, the issue now is kind of like what you talked about earlier, where we're either, throwing the talk only class to the people or just a technique only class to the people, and they wonder why people are acting like that one fella did when he only gets a 45-minute, section to go, well, this is crap and it's no good, it's not going to work. Why? Because you haven't got into preach the truth yet to them, and you haven't given them the ability to see that, first of all, you understand what the real problem is. And then, what we can do to solve the problem, again, not based upon what Kip thinks or what Matt thinks singularly, but what we as a group of, just now, my gosh, I mean, look how big our group of influencers has become, of those people that have helped us, continually hone the message and to make sure that we're current and relevant,
I've never wrapped my head around this until just recently, but anyone that is practicing medicine has a protocol. If you didn't have a protocol and you were just left to practice medicine with just your gut, we didn't tell you how much of the cortisone to draw up. We didn't tell you how much of the nitro pill to give. We didn't tell you how to hang a nitro drip in the first place, and we certainly didn't tell you how to paralyze someone. Just go forth and do good things. We gave you all the drugs, we gave you all the tools, but we just said go forth and do good things. We would have people gorked out of their mind or have people under-medicated. Responding to assault is the same way. EVE simply gives you the protocol. This is how you should respond. This is how and when you should respond. This is why you should respond and how you should respond to protect yourself, to protect you from the media, from how people view you, to protect you from the courtroom, not only a courtroom of public opinion, but the actual courtroom, and really to protect your mind from being that person that's PTSDing later or leaving the service completely after spending thousands upon thousands of dollars to get into it. So if you can't wrap your head around why you need an assault class or why you need an escaping violent encounters class, think of it from purely a protocol standpoint.
And yeah, that's a great way to bring it out, because even I've addressed it the same way with just actually saying like the force levels. And, because we hear the people that go, well, just, kill them all, let God sort out, or I'd whack everybody with no two bottle, or I'd hit them with the Halligan tool, or, a 14 gauge in the back of the hand, whatever it may be. But the point is to say, look, with a drug, don't we have dosages, routes, right? Indications and contraindications. Same thing with the use of force. The use of force has dosages, how much? Has routes. Is it empty hand? Is it verbal? Is it, my feet? Is it, what level, right? And then you have indications, when should I use force? And then contraindications, when should I not? And so it's kind of like the identical way to look at it. And absolutely, we're just saying, look, we don't expect you to be a critical thinker in any other part of your job without some form of training and experience. And that's all we try to do with the use of force and violence prevention, is to say, look, here is violence, the leading cause of all injury in healthcare. Number one, not needle sticks or back injuries or exposure to infectious disease. Number one is the violent assault is causing lost work time. And yet we just want to go, well, if we sweep it under the rug and it'll be okay. My goodness, which goes back to what you were talking about earlier. If you've got an employee who's a prior or maybe a current amateur or pro MMA fighter, and you've never said, hey, look, this part or that part is, good to use on the job, and maybe you shouldn't use this piece. But we're very familiar with cases where providers are sentenced to prison time, or they've lost their jobs, and these were good people, or you wouldn't have hired them to begin with. One
of my favorites is the getting a little bit back up. Is simply the guy or girl inside the hospital who is trained professionally. They're taking a BJJ class, or they're taking a Muay Thai class, and they now have someone that has become an aggressor in their hospital. And they know that arm bar or that submissive chokehold or getting someone to the point to submit to, turn loose of someone is what they would do in class. And they've never been trained otherwise. Ladies, gents, they're gonna employ that tactic on that person.
I mean, it has happened, and and
over and over again.
Yeah, and employees have been let go, and these were good, good employees or people that were well-meaning. I mean, they were trying to do the right thing, and sometimes again, if we haven't trained people for what is reasonable, they're going to do what they feel was right at the moment, right? And just because what I felt, remember, emotion and logic don't always go hand in hand, right? But it's important that people realize that it's a rabbit hole, man, or it's an onion. It's an elephant at the table, and how do you eat that elephant, right? One bite at a time. And the more that people really break it down and they start to go through it piece by piece, they realize like you said, we essentially give you a protocol, but it's not us standing over your shoulder, because no different than a protocol book, you might have to turn the page, because in your experience, and I guarantee in everybody that's watching this now, in their experience, the average person that they were treating for shortness of breath or a chest pain or a knee injury usually has more than just the knee injury or just the chest pain or just the shortness of breath or just this allergy. So, you're having to flow sometimes between protocols, and all that is about being a critical thinker. But, I will tell you that now, switching gears to, let's talk about some of the instructor things. If you had some little bitty tidbits of advice or information that you might want to pass on to, say, new instructors, heck, maybe even some, instructors that have been teaching for a while, but, I know that you always say the message correctly, because, people are always jumping up and down after class, and they're posting on social media, and they're sending me a private message thanking me for, the program itself and you teaching it. And so it's like, so I know that things are going correct. Is there certain things that you found work really well for you when you're teaching, stuff that you think maybe helps get it over? Because I guess what I'm trying to say is, once you understand the material, the job really becomes hard for the instructor, because then what you're doing is having to read your classroom, and
I think that's probably the first place is you have to have a command of your material. If the one thing that I've seen of new instructors falling down in the class, it's they think that they have a command in the material, but they're not 100% solid, and they'll fake it till they make it, because in the EMS, the fire, or the nursing environment, sometimes the first couple of classes that you teach after a trainer, you kind of know the large majority of what should be taught, and you'll learn the rest as you go along. That is an epic chance to fail in teaching, because you are no longer, as an instructor, teaching a student. The student is teaching themselves by what you are sharing to them. You're facilitating, you're not teaching. You cannot change their culture. They have to be open to changing their own culture. And that's why this course resonates and it rips you apart inside. If you're an instructor, probably one of the best things that you can do is preface right off the bat, I am going to make you uncomfortable. I am at points going to make you absolutely hate me today. I'm going to make you like me. I'm going to make you feel like I'm talking to you in the same way. If you attend a religious, service before, you might have felt that person was specifically talking to you. You're going to feel that way. You're going to feel like you're wrong, or no, I'm going to challenge this dude at this point, because I am going to rip as an instructor at your heartstrings and make you uncomfortable, either verbally or physically. And if you feel uncomfortable at any point, ask me to stop and let's rip that apart. Another common mistake that I see with instructors is they want to teach to the center of the room. You're not going to change a culture by teaching to the median of the room, the C student. You're not going to change a culture that way. You've got to change a culture from the A student to the F student. So get out of your head of teaching to the center and teach to the damn class, which means if there's a crazy question that you're looking at going, how is this dude paralyzing people in the street, but not putting A and B together, oversimplify it so that they can put A and B together. Because if you shut them down, that person might be the most influential person in the entire class.
And that's actually probably the most important advice, because I have found that more often than not. And sometimes you don't really know right off until you're looking at them or looking for them. But man, again, if you don't know the material, you're so busy thinking about the material that you can't pay attention to the group, you know what I mean? And see who is your, you know, your influencers in the group. But you're exactly right. I've actually had people who, and speaking of questions or comments that a person makes, a lot of times I have found, at least, you know, if you've set your opening up correctly in that first 4 hours, you no longer get questions in the form of a challenge. You're actually getting questions now that, although they may sound challenging, when you really break it down, the person's asking because that's what they really believe at that moment, and they're really confused, and they're truly asking you a question. And so with that adult learner, if we make that person look or sound stupid at that time, you know, we're lost for good. Nobody's going to ask another question. And that person may have that same, you know, they're the ones brave enough to bring up that question in class right now, you know? So, you know, yeah, you're exactly right, man. Of never, it's like you said earlier, you know, the first couple of days, you're always going to have those people who wanted to be there. I mean, they signed up. They're the ones that, you know, wanted to take their time and to at least listen and give us an opportunity. But then the ones that sign up last are the ones that are sitting here like this. But that's why we created the program the way that we did, and the way that we've, you know, made it, is because we expect people to come in like this, and we want them to go from this, and not because we forced you to, but because we revealed the truth, and we want them going from here to holy cow, and then they're hanging on every word. And, you know, we just talked about that again.
And not only that, you know, we have, you know, we're both very exacerbated in talking. I thought, and you'll be the first one to understand exactly where I'm going with this. I thought I had to be a master guru in Cali, or I thought I had to be taking a BJJ class and at least have a black belt before I even thought about taking class. Because what if some guy's hands move faster than mine? Or what if someone wants to parry with their left hand or parry with their right hand, or drunk punch me when I'm not expecting it, or whatever have you? And I realized something in this class. Do I move well? I probably give myself a good C+ of how I move. I'm still not that B where I want to be, and I'm certainly not an A. If you ever watch Kip moves at an A+, but I'll tell you that he thinks he moves like a C. So the funny part about all this is, get to the point in your skills where you can teach the course and you know exactly how to teach that skill in the masterful way that Kip has laid it out. Don't deviate. Don't try and add any. Don't try and do the armbar twist like Kip might have done in your class that made you go, whoa, that's cool. Because probably if you're an instructor, you're the type A personality that wanted to be in the front of the room on the very first day, that wanted to listen to everything. You're not the student. The student might have seen that armbar and gone, this isn't for me.
That's right.
I can't do that, and now I want to try that. Or worse yet, might be the kid that wants to try that now and show me the armbar, which is not what this class is about. So teach the material only. Let the Kips that can show us all the other nuances and seances that you can do be Kip. He's the founder of the course. Don't be Kip. Be yourself. Stick to the course and the material, and don't deviate, because you'll jack yourself up.
And the whole don't be Kip thing, you were there the first time Jeff ever said that. And when Jeff said it, because that was in Daytona, wasn't that that was the first time he said it, because he got up there and sat on the desk, and because he was working on an instructor trainer. And then we had him say it again when we were in Missouri.
You mean that guy?
Yeah. Yeah. And so we turned around and he's like, you know, be Kip. And I'm sitting in the back of the room going, wait a minute, I wrote this class, you need to be like, and then it dawned on me, oh yeah. And here's what's funny. When it comes to any of the little extras, or when I'm putting that out there, it's usually to try to prove that the basics are what will allow you to get to this piece. And so it's funny that when people come and take the advanced stuff with a stick and a knife and, the firearm stuff, and they train it and they start going, oh my God, but it's all the stuff from the basic class that lets you get to this piece right here. And I go, that's it. Being the perpetual white belt, I'm always going to train. I'm always going to train, and again, I'm always going to train where I'm at now with Atlanta Budokan, because these guys are, with the Alliance BJJ, are amazing. But the whole big thing that we want to just try to get everybody to understand, and especially this last piece with the instructors, is you practiced. I'll never forget when I had said something to you and it had bothered you because you cared so much about doing it right.
Bothered me. You didn't bother me, Kip. You ripped me apart and danced all over me, and then didn't even put me back together again.
No, all by saying you need more practice, and that was it.
Yeah, teaching is probably one of my most favorite things to do. And when you can teach a course that changes a culture, because I was not the culture changer for the good. I was the guy as a lieutenant that said, boys, get the Halligan and the axe off the truck and we'll go greet that dog, or we'll go greet that front door. I was the grab the tool, it's time to fight dude. So, there were people that I swore to protect as a company officer. And there were people that I fell down on the sword. Now, we never were in a situation that went south. Or if we were in a situation that went south, we were never in a situation that went south to the point of making the news. But those guys that I swore to protect, those guys that they were my comrades on the truck, are those people that someday when they promote to lieutenant or captain, and many of those guys, actually several of the guys that were on shift with me are now lieutenants and captains in my department. They remember those days. And so we still haven't had Eve in my fire department for the entire department. So is something that I taught a dude when he was a probationary firefighter going to, now that he's calling the shots on the truck, be what he implores his people to do? And that's why when I hit the position in the hospital of being a director, I said, I'm not teaching Eve to show someone how to do things because I'd been a victim before. I'm showing people how to do things because I know how absolutely catastrophic the situation can turn out for an untrained individual if you let them go on the school of hard knocks. Mm-hmm. And so everyone is going to have a reason for teaching this course. So instructors, whatever your reason is, whether you've been a victim or whether you've been the idiot like me who've said, let's handle it this way, or whether you've never been in a situation before, but you're not sure how you'll react, be honest. Mm-hmm. Tell your entire room the why it's personal to you. Because once it becomes personal to you, you're not going to fail. If it's not personal to you and the culture hasn't truly changed in you, but you're teaching this because you're a training officer because you have to, or you're teaching this because it's good side money, man, stick to CPR. Stick to something else that will, you can get away with it, or fake it until you make it, or pushing hard gives someone the feeling of accomplishment, but stay away from Eve. Eve is, you need to be invested personally, because that's the only way that people are going to buy into what you say.
Well, I'll tell you what, Matt, brother, and aren't you surprised I called you Matt through this?
Yeah, I am.
It's always been Lopez for
Lopez, your brother.
But as far as it goes, thanks so much, man, for your time. I really do appreciate it, because I think that there's a ton of golden nuggets of information that'll be in here. I know you're a busy guy and you've got to go. Everybody, this has been, Matt Lopez, a guy who I just absolutely think the world of. And whether you think he looks like The Rock, Vin Diesel, or Al Roker, that's going to be up to you. But
with the hurricane right now, you'll probably think I look like Roker. So,
but I'm Kip Teitsort, where we're all about saving yours while you save others, and we'll see you soon.